Hello my friends, HM here. In this video I'm going to talk about how Ukraine managed to shoot down Russia's most precious airplane, and we can see it right here. There's a picture of it. It's the most precious airplane because it's the only airplane Russia has that has a big radar on top of it and that is able to see Ukrainian airplanes or missiles coming from 600 kilometers away, and also to direct Russian airplanes towards Ukraine airplanes, and also direct Russian air-to-air defense missiles towards Ukraine airplanes. So it's an extremely important airplane. Without these airplanes, Russia cannot effectively manage their air campaign against Ukraine. So it's very important for Ukraine to destroy these airplanes, and it's very important for Russia to keep them. So how did Ukraine actually manage to shoot this airplane down? Because Russia is, of course, doing a lot of things to keep them out of harm's way by flying them many kilometers behind enemy lines. This video is going to explore that a little bit more in depth. I haven't seen other YouTubers have any deep explanation about how Ukraine managed to do this, but I think I've found some of the tidbits how they did it. But let's get into it. Okay, so the first fact we should establish is where exactly did this happen? And I have a map that shows it. Here we have Crimea. Let's zoom out a little bit. And here we have the Black Sea and the Azov Sea. Let me see. Here we have Ukraine, and all of this here is Russia, all the way down here. But let's zoom in a little bit and then move up here. The downing happened right here in this spot here, so south of Rostov-on-Don, which is a very large Russian city. And Ukraine could have launched a rocket from this place here. That would be the shortest possible distance where Ukraine safely could launch a missile. So how long is it from here to where it was shot down? It's about 200 kilometers. And Ukraine also managed to shoot down another Russian radar and control aircraft, same aircraft, A50 they call it. And I can show you where that was shot down. It was shot down here in the Sea of Azov, outside of this city called Kyrovlitka. I butchered that up, I'm sure. But you know what I mean, and it was down here, it was shot down. And again, for Ukraine to shoot this airplane down, they would have to launch from approximately this area up here, Zaporizhzhia. But again, if we take the measurement here from this area to where it was down, it was about 200 kilometers again. That is a little bit mysterious because NATO has some Patriot systems that has been delivered to Ukraine, but there are no known Patriot missiles that can fly further than 160 kilometers. So they wouldn't be able to shoot down a Russian airplane from 200 kilometers apart. But there is another option, and let's get into that right away. So this other option, what is that? There is this article here by Ukrainska Pravda, which is a reputed Ukrainian newspaper, and here in an English version. And they claim that they have an informant in the defense intelligence of Ukraine that told them that this was a weapon that was used to shoot this down. And there's this picture here of this weapon. It's a pretty big thing, 8 meters long or something. But let's check this weapon and see if it actually can be used for this downing. Okay, so I looked this weapon up on Wikipedia to see what its specifications were. And there are a couple of variants here that has a range between 250 kilometers and 300 kilometers. So that should have the range. And also these long-range variants here were made in 1970. I also read elsewhere that the 300 kilometers variant was more experimental. It was never finished development on it. So what is possible is this 250 kilometers variant that actually has the range needed for these kills that we have seen Ukraine has made. On the same Wikipedia page here, I can see that current operators are Bulgaria, Iran, Kazakhstan, North Korea, Poland, Syria, and Turkmenistan. There are 2 NATO countries here that are currently operating these systems. That would be Bulgaria and Poland. And we know that both Bulgaria and Poland has received recently Patriot air defense systems, which means that they no longer need these old Soviet-era air defense systems that are less capable than Patriot. For instance, Patriot can shoot down ballistic missiles. This Soviet-era thing definitely cannot shoot down a ballistic missile, but it can shoot down an airplane, especially a slow-moving Russian radar airplane. So what could have happened is that Bulgaria and Poland have simply transferred their stocks of this S-200 system to Ukraine. That's interesting because they haven't announced it, and also normally NATO has an order to Ukraine that they're not allowed to use these weapons that are transferred to Ukraine. They're not allowed to use them inside Russia, and the kill here we saw a few days ago was deep inside Russia, south of Rostov-on-Don. So I guess that rule is no longer relevant. And also Stoltenberg, NATO's General Secretary, has said that F-15s, when they come to Ukraine, Ukraine can use them inside Russia on legitimate military targets. So I think there has been a change of heart and mind in NATO that now Ukraine can use weapons inside Russia if it is a military target. We didn't allow that before, but now that has changed. So this is where it comes from, this weapon here. But let's dig a little deeper. Now I found this article here from July 10, 2023 that has a headline of how possible is it to remake an S-200 missile into a long-range ground attack weapon. Now, that's not what we're interested in knowing here, but that it has a little bit of information that can shed some light on how Ukraine could possibly have used this missile to shoot down this Russian airplane. It says here, especially since the S-200M Vega M version of this system has a declared range of 240 kilometers against air target, with the S-200D, which was developed yet never commissioned to the Army, could reach even further, up to 300 kilometers. That's why I said before that this 300 kilometers version of it probably doesn't exist. But that S-200M Vega, yeah, I think that's the one Ukraine got from Bulgaria and Poland. And it also says, in order to be capable of targeting an object 200 kilometers away, this system had an antenna with a total area of approximately 25 square meters, so a big radar station. That's why its only purpose and capability was to find and lock on strategic bombers flying at high altitude. This Russian big aircraft with a big radar on it, that compares very much to a strategic bomber, which would also be a big aircraft that are flying at high altitude. So it's the same kind of target. And here you can see this radar station that presumably has a range of 200 kilometers. But I think actually the range is larger than 200 kilometers, because if you have a missile that can fly 240 kilometers, what's the point of having a radar that can only see 200 kilometers? So I would assume that this radar can actually see the full distance of the range for the missile. It's not a sharp cutoff when you have this radar. It just means that the signal gets weaker and weaker the further it looks out. And it's most comfortable to see it within 200 kilometers, but it can probably also see a weak signal 250 kilometers out. Anyway, here they say in this article that if you wanted to convert this missile into a ground attack missile, that radar could only be used at a distance of 40 kilometers because of the curvature of the world that is round, and radar cannot see through the earth. But with a high-flying target that flies high up like this radar airplane from Russia, then of course it can be seen from much further away with this radar. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. So that means that yes, Ukraine has the radar that can direct this missile towards a Russian airplane flying 200 kilometers away. And also that system has the ability to send a radio signal to missile while it's flying en route towards its target to redirect it to another position, because for this missile to fly 200 kilometers, that will take some time, many minutes. Even if it's flying at several thousand kilometers an hour. And the target it's supposed to hit can also see it coming, so it can change course. So you can't just rely on that, okay, we can see it's there, and then we send the missile towards that. It will have moved since then, and it can also move in ways that is not on an interception course with the missile in order to avoid being shot down. So my point is that this radar system must have a way to send a radio signal with a new position where the missile should aim for in order to direct its course towards a target that is trying to avoid being intercepted by it. And also I can tell you that There's this ground radar that can see very far away because it's a massive radar. You can see how big it is. There's a man here for scale. But on board the missile itself, there will be a much smaller radar at the nose of this missile. Down here we see it. And that radar can probably see 10 kilometers ahead. So really the goal here is to use the big ground-based radar here to direct the missile within 10 kilometers of the target, and then the radar inside the missile itself will take over and do the last job of homing in on the target and destroy it. But it could also be because this is on the borderline of what this radar can do and the range for this missile, so maybe Ukraine got some help from some alternative radar sources and control sources for this missile, and let's talk about that. Now, the help I'm talking about here is the fact that NATO is actually operating its own fleet of radar airborne systems. It's called AVACs, and they're operating them along all the border of NATO and also at the Black Sea, of course. And they can see where the Russian airplanes are, and they could be used to direct anti-aircraft missiles towards Russian airplanes if need be. And who knows, since Poland and Bulgaria are the likely contributors of this S-200 air-to-air missile system, I'm pretty sure it's integrated with NATO command and control structure with this AVAX system. So it could be that it was actually a NATO AVAX system that directed and controlled this S-200 missile to shoot down both of these Russian A50 aircraft. I find it fairly likely because it came from NATO countries, these missiles, and also if Russia doesn't have these A50 airplanes, they will be blind. They won't be able to use their long-range anti-aircraft missiles as effectively. They would have to rely on ground-based radar systems that can be attacked and that cannot see as long away as airborne radar systems. As I just said, the ground-based radar system for this S-200 can see 200 kilometers away effectively, and very likely more than that, but not as effectively with less accuracy because the signal gets weaker and the radar signature has to be stronger for this signal to be clear. I'll then say that this radar, Russian radar command center, would have a very strong radar signature because it's a big plane. So I would highly expect that the ground radar from Ukraine there would be able to see it. But it could have been directed from NATO aircraft as well. Now, this article here I found simply confirms that both France, UK, and the US have been flying missions with radar command and control airplanes or AVACs airplanes in the Black Sea. So I know that they could have also directed the attack by a Ukraine missile towards this Russian airplane, just to know that that was not fiction. There is one more possibility, and that is that Ukraine could have used F-16 fighter jets to shoot down these Russian aircraft. But I found this article here that goes into depth about when Ukraine will receive their F-16 fighter jets. And it says that Ukraine are not getting them before this summer here in 2024. So Ukraine don't have them, and I believe it also because the source here, I'm Danish myself, and the source here, it says that the Danish defense minister confirmed the first shipment of 6 F-16s was expected during the second quarter of 2024, a 6 months delay from what was initially expected. We used to not lie about things here in Denmark, so I believe this is the earliest that Ukraine will have these F-16 fighter jets. Also, 6 airplanes will not win the war for Ukraine. I read elsewhere that Russia is attacking Ukraine with 300 fighter jets. So in order for Ukraine to gain air superiority, they need similar force of about 300 modern aircraft that are superior to Russia's airplanes. And it will take a long time, perhaps 3-4 years, to get 300 F-16 fighter jets operational with Ukrainian pilots and also technicians and air bases that can repair all these airplanes and spare parts and everything, and also weapon systems for them. I think they'll take up to 3 to 4 years, but it will be a gradual process. It will start with 6 airplanes, probably here in the second quarter of 2024, and then will just grow from there. So yeah, I will rule out that F-16s have been used in this attack. It was done by S-200 missile systems and a ground radar from Ukraine and possibly an airborne radar from NATO. But that would also have implied that NATO directly directed a weapon against Russian air forces. Would they have done that? I don't know. Russia would never know, so yes, I think it's definitely possible. But okay, I think my video is long enough, and I'm glad if you have watched it so far, and I hope you liked it and learned a little bit about how anti-aircraft systems are operating and working. And I'll be making many more videos in the future, and if you like this kind of topics, then subscribe to my channel and give it a like. I'll appreciate that very much. Otherwise, there's only one thing to say, and that is I wish you a great life in freedom and democracy. Goodbye.